All right, let's get started with the line tool. You can find it here in the large tool set. It's also L as a keyboard shortcut. Line tool is very easy to use. It's a two-click process. The first click sets the starting point, and the second click determines the end point. Now, I must stress in SketchUp that you want to click and release, not click and drag or click and hold when you're using the line tool. Because, as you'll notice, the line tool will continue drawing until you basically close a series of edges. Or if you press escape, you can stop the rubber band effect here. Now, if you want precise measurements, you can click and release to start the line tool. You can feel it snap in the red axes. And I can look down in my value control box to see what distance I'm drawing at. So in this case, if I want 30 feet, just simply type in 30, foot sign, and then press return. Now I get that rubber band effect going in the green axes. I can type in 18, foot sign, return. And for my next line, instead of drawing this line at 30 feet, what I'm going to do is infer. So if I just hover my cursor over this endpoint, I'm not clicking, just hovering, I can infer and see that dotted line go up to use as my inference point. I'll just click. And then in SketchUp, to end a point, you can just click on the little green circle there, and that's going to create a face. SketchUp refers to surfaces as faces and lines as edges. So you can always see if you're on a face or on an edge. You can also infer to the midpoint with the little cyan. All right, let's go ahead and use the rectangle tool. Before we do though, let's start a new document just to have a clean model space. Rectangle tool is located right here. It's also R as a keyboard shortcut. The rectangle tool, like the line tool, is a two-click process. So the first click sets your origin point, and the second click determines your diagonal corner. Now as I hover, you can see I get this diagonal showing me a perfect square. It'll sort of snap to that. And you also see one for the golden rectangle or golden section. So it's that ratio there. Now I could click just to set this rectangle, or I could type in a value. So if you notice in the value control box, it's looking for two distances. So your X distance, comma, your Y distance. So as I'm drawing here, I'll just release my mouse. I'll type in my first distance. Let's just say 15 foot sign, comma, 10 foot sign, enter. Let's go ahead and start another document. File new. And let's take a look at the circle tool. It's located right here. It's also C as a keyboard shortcut. The circle tool is a two-click process. So the first click you want to set as the origin point, and the second click determines the radius. Before you draw with the circle tool, it's important to note that SketchUp doesn't create true arcs and curves. It actually creates them in segments. And you can see that in the bottom right before we draw our circle. SketchUp wants us to draw a 24-sided or segmented circle. And by default, that's okay. It really limits the number of sides or edges in the model. And it's good for 90% of the work that you'll ever use in SketchUp. You may find times that you need to change the number of sides, and I'll show you how to do that. First, let's click, set our origin point, and the second click is going to determine our radius. So you can see the segments starting to increase there. I can simply just type in a value of 8 feet and press enter, set my circle at an 8-foot radius. Now, like the line tool and rectangle tool, it remembers your last input, so I can type in 5 foot sign, hit enter. I can also change the number of sides. So see here how it's 5 feet and it's 24 sides. Maybe I want it at 6 feet, so type in 6 foot sign, hit enter. And let's change the number of sides. So instead of 24 sides, let's try 12 sides. So I'll type in 12 and then the S key and then enter. So now you'll see we have a 12-sided 6-foot radius circle. Now that's not really ideal, so we want to add more sides. In this case, I'll type in 48 and then S and then press enter. So you may think, what happens now if you click on another tool and you need to change the number of sides or even the radius of the circle? You can't just click on it to change it. You can, however, go to Entity Info. So if I select the line, the Select tool, so if I select that outer edge so it highlights blue, we're going to go to Window, Entity Info. It's going to bring up this little pop-up. Here you can find information about the layer that it's on, the radius, and the segments. So I'm going to bring this back to 24 sides. I'll just press the Tab key to get myself out of that. And then for the radius, maybe I'll change it to 8 feet. Next, let's take a look at the Polygon tool. The Polygon tool is almost identical to the Circle tool. The procedures are exactly the same. It's this tool right here. The only difference is it's really critical to type in the number of sides before you draw it. The default is hexagon. So let's say I want an octagon. I can just type in 8, press enter. And again, 2-click process. So the first click sets the origin point and the second click determines the radius. Just gonna start a new document just to clean up the space as well. Now, one thing to note when you are drawing with the Polygon tool is it is pretty critical where you put your cursor, because that's going to determine, based on the shape that you're using, where your line work is going to end. So in this case, if I follow along the red axis here, my endpoint is going to end right there. Now, like the Circle tool, you can always take the Select tool, select the edges, and in Entity Info, you can actually change the number of sides here. So a question you might have is, well, what's the difference then? If you have a circle and a polygon that are both relatively the same number of sides, what's the true difference then? The difference between the two really is once you extrude these in 3D, which we'll do it a little bit later, you'll notice that in the segments, your edges are defined. So it gives you that hard edge. Whereas on a circle, it rounds or softens those edges. Now, it doesn't mean that those edges aren't there. They're just hidden. You can see that by turning on Hidden Geometry. Before we use the Arc tool, let's go ahead and just draw a square in our model space. It doesn't really matter the length of it. I just want it to fill up the space. Now to use the Arc tool, which is located right here, it's also A as a keyboard shortcut. It's a 3-click process. And like the Polygon and Circle tool, it has a number of sides. For me, I never really change this number of sides. If you're doing more detailed work, you may find that 12 sides is too many. Really depends on your specific workflow. But for me, 90% of the time, I don't change this. Now what I want to do is I want to create a perfect fillet, a round corner on this edge here. And I'm just going to start with an arbitrary point right here. So I'll click on the edge. It's my first click. My second click, I want to be on this edge. And you'll notice something as I hover down. You'll feel it snap. And it's snapping with that purple or magenta color. That's telling me that those two angles are 45 degrees each, giving us a perfect fillet. So I can click, set my endpoint, and then my third click is going to actually determine the radius. So in this case, I could type in the value manually, or I can hover until I see the magenta color again, letting me know that this is tangent to the edge. In that case, I'll click again to give our perfect edge. Now notice that there are two different line weights in SketchUp. There's the profile edges, which is the thick line defining the outside or the profile of your geometry. And then there's this thin line, and that thin line determines the separation or break between two surfaces. If we were to use the eraser and erase these two edges, you can see that that profile edge comes back up there. Now, a great thing about the Arc tool is as you're drawing with it, say I draw this arc here, on my third click, you'll notice another thing, and that's tangent to one edge. So see this cyan color? That's telling me that this arc is tangent to the horizontal line here. If I move further down, I'll get another tangent line right there. And that's telling me that this arc is tangent to the vertical edge, or this edge here. It's very useful because as you continue drawing with the Arc tool, so if I just draw over here, you'll see that it wants to draw and continue drawing in a tangent. And it's a great way to create landscapes or oval shapes, any kind of organic form. The last drawing tool to go over is the Freehand tool. You can click on it right here. And unlike the other drawing tools, this is a click and drag. And you can see in the bottom here, it says press left mouse button and drag to draw. This is really a tool that you can use to create contours. So you can drag to create any kind of elements here. And if we had a plane here, you could see these contours, then you can stack up. It's really the only way that I've really used the Freehand tool. That pretty much wraps up all the 2D drawing tools. Let's move ahead to the next chapter where we'll learn how to model in 3D and create various types of roof pitches.